Welcome back to the Awakening Conversations podcast. My name is Kate and I'm here with my co-host Amanda. Last week in part one of this series, we began unpacking the story of Marc Gafni, his teachings, the controversies around him, and the unsettling ways spiritual language can be twisted into something quite different than it appears on the surface. We traced his connection to Shabtai Tzvi and the Sabbatean lineage, and explored how those influences show up in his philosophies he continues to share today. In this second part of our series, we're taking the conversation deeper by looking more closely at some of Marc Gafni's connections and influences today. We dive into the depth of his relationship with Aubrey Marcus, how closely their work and philosophies are tied, and what that means when Gaffney's ideas are given a platform to reach a wider audience. We also look at his disturbing connection to Jeffrey Epstein and the way he publicly framed Epstein's actions and death, which reveals even more about the lens through which Gaffney interprets boundary breaking. From there, we widen the lens and look at the bigger picture of how this Sabbatean energy and ideology echoes in wider cultural movements, where language of freedom, inclusivity, and compassion can be used to soften resistance and blur essential boundaries. What begins as a call for liberation can, little by little, be stretched, reframed, and inverted until it carries something far more destructive. So in this episode, we unpack how that pattern works and why it's so important to be able to sense when genuine liberation crosses over into distortion. This isn't light material, but what we've found in looking at it is that when we shine light on these darker dynamics, when we name them, question them, and hold them up to scrutiny, they begin to lose their power. So let's dive into part two of this conversation.
So yeah, we've brought all these pieces together, and these are just pieces of some of Marc Gafni's teachings, right? He's prolific, I will say, but I think that what we're pointing to is an explanation for what people sensed. What we're doing is connected him directly to Shabtai Tzvi, right? And the fact that he believes himself to be the reincarnation, the spark, he has the spark of him within him and his desire to continue his work, right? So there's this like connection there, which I look back at that conversation and it was kind of this light bulb of, wow, this is like there's so many parallels here. How can I find this connection? And it's like, it's there. And despite the secrecy, I'll say this was not, like, I would not have found this information on my own because it was like buried within this conversation. I don't really enjoy listening to Marc Gafni, especially, but that was found there. So we looked at, in the Sabbateans, they converted to Islam, then the branch of the Frankists and into Christianity. And then, we've seen Gaffney, he inserts himself and creates a community, gets kicked out, goes to the integral community, and I think he's still involved with that. But these scandals break out, and then he goes into hiding until it feels safe to pop his head out again. And then, but he can't do it for very long before people with this one, like I don't know when and or if he will be on Aubrey's podcast again, because I don't think that it was like an exposure in a way, right? People saw it. It feels like it hurt Aubrey's brand. And, I think in previous episodes, we might have given Aubrey a little bit of benefit of the doubt as far as interacting with Marc, but you and I have seen, like, there are a lot of videos. He's done a lot of work with him. And like we mentioned, this most recent book was published under Aubrey's publishing company that Aubrey founded. So he wrote the foreword for that book. And then I'm just going to read a little clip from that foreword, which I think displays or represents the connection and the understanding that Aubrey has for what Marc Gafni's philosophy and ideology really is. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. So it has been with great delight and a voracious appetite that I have consumed the teachings of Dr. Marc Gafni and colleagues, whose world philosophy they call cosmo-erotic humanism. Gaffney holds the distinguished distinguished position in my heart as my lineage master in the original wisdom of Solomon and later cosmo-erotic humanism lineage. Yeah, so it's not that I don't think Aubrey was in the dark as far as the philosophies and background, and maybe he truly believes in it seems like he truly believes in Gaffney's work, and so I guess it's up for people to decide whether they, now knowing this information, do they want to continue learning through Aubrey Marcus and his influence, and I feel like we saw like an exodus of people were like, no, I'm done. I'm done following him. I'm done listening to him, because we kind of saw some true colors or saw some things about him that they can no longer take him seriously or trust his judgment and integrity. There's another part in the foreword that might be, I think, is interesting. I have taught the models contained within this paradigm shifting book in my community, fit for service, and seeing similarly powerful effects by placing attention on each of the three contexts for relating each quality of relationship had the opportunity to reach the full wonder and fruition of its unique potential. So, you know, people within his realm, like, do they understand what are the roots of what Aubrey is promoting, right? I think, and if people know that and they choose yes, then that's it's from a place of knowing, and then, but if not, that's in a way deception, and right, because they're not sharing like what is the like, for the most part, Gaffney's not speaking about this is the Sabbatean influence. He's using other words to describe what that Sabbatean influence is, right? The breaking of boundaries. He's put different language on it to try to get it in so it could be more palatable.
Yeah, and the other thing that when you watch those two particular videos that we took clips from, and I encourage anyone who's interested to watch them both, he, Shabtai sees, and I'll never be able to repeat it the way that Mark says it or describe it, but there's this really like fascination with this eros, which we've heard him talk about in that particular episode and other episodes that he's been on with Aubrey. And while again, there's this, sense of it's a liberation of the energy that lives within you to bring it into a fullness. The thing that I think is important to just keep remembering is the connection with that distortion we felt, that energetic we felt, that there was more than just the words. It was more than just the reframing. It was because behind that, this energetic of what he's trying to purport is through this lens of your liberation, but it's going to be in this like tainted way, in this inverted way, where we're going to cross sexual boundaries to give you this fullness of your desire. I just think it's such a public show of that. It's a public show. So if it's the public show, then that must be what happens in the not public arena, and where we're talking about that. And, I have watched other videos of his, and he didn't do a particular direct response to our conversation with Donna, but there was a sermon that he gave weekly that was clearly addressing many of the things that we spoke to. And it's such, again, challenging to watch, because you see this man who takes these spiritual elements, and he in particular in this episode his conversation was talking about tantra and this principle within tantra, but then twisting it to make him the victim, to make him the one who is, what's the word he keeps using, demonized. And this twisting of this beautiful principle to fit his story, to show how he's been the one wronged by women and how the women are the one who are still not liberated. Like, there's so much layer to it. And I think, again, it's just coming back again and again and again to this trusting of our inner sense of where there is distortion, because you can watch enough of his stuff and go, oh, there is some truth in that, because there are valid, helpful, progressive, perhaps that's a word, I don't know, principles within that can, when followed in a certain way, be liberating and add to the life of the human and the spiritual world. But it's when there's darkness in there. there really is. And what we've seen and what we've been able to connect through his own admissions is that there is this Sabbatean energy, and him dedicating his life work because of the spark that he feels of him alive in him as a reincarnation to continue that forward. And I mean, again, you can do a lot of research, or there's some stuff out there about Sabbatai Zevi. None of it's particularly paints a beautiful picture of anything but discretion, anything but this boundary breaking, anything but these radical acts that through sex was his idea of how to crack open and liberate the feminine energy. So it's a disturbing connection to make.
Yeah. And moving into our next topic that we want to discuss, let's talk about Gaffney in relation to Epstein. I did watch a video that was put out around the time of Epstein's death, basically framing Epstein as a Sabbatean, right? But we also have a connection between Gaffney and Epstein, and we're gonna listen to a video it was from a live call that came out around the time of Jeffrey Epstein's suicide. But his partner, Christina Kincaid, she was friends with him. She worked for Victoria's Secret, and she was in his black book. So there's evidence. We can actually link to that in the show notes too. I'm sure everyone listening knows about Epstein, and I don't really need to go into that, but we can just look to see like what is Gaffney's response to his death, right? So let's watch that now.
More and more love be felt in all hearts and shared without restraint, right? Christina, I pray for my friend Jeffrey. And Christina, let's put it to all panelists and attendees. My friend Jeffrey, may he rest in peace. Right? I want to just say that right for a second, everyone. Right? It's just like, wow. Let's pray for all the people, right? For all the people. And the people who have done things wrong, right, that we demonize. Right? Christina now, right, is praying for Jeffrey Epstein, who just committed suicide. He was a friend of Christina's. When she was a Victoria's Secret model, Jeffrey was friendly with that crowd, and right, everyone with Alan Dershowitz and Bill Clinton, and everyone kind of flew on Jeffrey's plane. And we all know that Jeffrey was out of bounds in the ways that he was, and we have zero tolerance for the things that Jeffrey did wrong. And yet, let's also own what the world did. The world took Jeffrey Epstein, if you guys followed this story, and they demonized him. They made him into the worst, most horrific devil in the world, not because there was a sense of moral outrage. Yes, he did obvious things that were wildly out of bounds, but because it sold newspapers. It was called Jeffrey Epstein News the last 3 weeks around the world because it was driving clicks. And if we can demonize someone and we can project all of our sexual shadow onto Jeffrey Epstein, then we're okay. So the demonization of Jeffrey Epstein was so intense that instead of being appropriately held accountable for his misdeed, and he committed suicide, right? Because we took all of our shadow and we put it on him, right? And I just actually found out that Jeffrey committed suicide right before church. And so I want to be politically incorrect. We're not interested in that, right? We're praying for our friend Jeffrey Epstein. And yes, I did just say our friend Jeffrey Epstein, who was a complex and beautiful man, right, in 1,000 different ways, and made serious mistakes and committed serious transgressions for which he needs to be held accountable. And he was filled with light. And we hold that complexity. We don't demonize. So Jeffrey, right, brother, right, rest in peace. Right? May the transition, right, be beautiful. May your karma be healed, right? And may the next step, right, be unbelievable. And may we take back the sexual shadow that we've projected onto you, right? Amen.
So that is exactly the tactic that was used when people were calling out Aubrey. Oh, you're projecting your shadow. And so like what he just did, it was like, oh, he killed himself because everyone was projecting their sexual shadow onto him, which, all right, like what we're seeing outside of us, right? There's something of that within us, right? Like we can look at that. We can say that. And also he uses that whole thing of like, oh, I'm being demonized for clicks, or versus like, no. Why is he being demonized? Why is he being demonized? Because for clicks or for what he was involved within. And because he's blackmailed powerful people all over the world through sexual deviancy and boundary breaking. And so for me, I receive that as this is Sabbatean energy of what Jeffrey Epstein has been involved with. Let's not demonize that. Let's not demonize the boundary breaking, despite the fact, like, how many young girls have been shattered, and men, right? How many men did acts that they didn't, that they wouldn't have done had they not been put in those compromise. I'm not taking accountability away from them, but it's a system that was designed to transgress, to break boundaries, to compromise people, to have power over people, and to say that there's like, I'm sorry, I'm not gonna be all love and light and look the other way to this very dark energy. And I'm sure Epstein is not the only one that's participated. He's the fall man for the system, right? It's still, I'm sure, existing, that infrastructure. But in a way, he is rationalizing, justifying, and creating an excuse for this dark energy that has broken so many people. And, maybe like say, oh, don't call them broken. You know what I mean? Like, that's not my place to call someone broken. But at the same time, right?
Yeah.
When you hear the stories of people who have been involved with any sort of sex slave industry, like, how can you not be shattered into a million pieces, right? And so how is that liberating the feminine?
Absolutely. And just to add to that, in my looking at the darkness, I have started to watch, it's called Soft White and Underbelly. It's
I've been watching a lot of
stuff keeps popping up on my feed now, and it's been there for a while. I'm like, all right, I'm gonna.
Was this
watch.
Netflix or YouTube?
This is YouTube. Soft White Underbelly. It's a channel that is showing the underbelly of America. And so one of the episodes I watched was these three sisters who'd done heroin. That was my entry into it. It was very well done. They were very honest. And then I've just been watching one about a woman who talks about trafficking. I encourage people even to watch that, because as you just said there, we can say we projected shadow onto Epstein, and that's for us to look at. Forgive him and the brokenness. You see this women, when they can tell their story high level and you ask them to go to what they experience, and they break apart. They are unable to find words. It is only a depth of hurt and emotion that sometimes they cannot even bring that to the surface, because there is a depth of a crack, whether it's broken fully apart or just a depth of crack that cannot be filled and cannot be healed. And, they talk about this one particular woman I watched, talked about then how that's kind of rolled out in her life. And, she's 35 now, and she's still fractured. She's not been able to have the access to any kind of healing. The patterns keep repeating. She finds herself in these situations, and all she longs for is love. So there is a depth of breaking that these things cause. And I almost feel as though that is asking us to just spiritually bypass. That's a form of spiritual bypassing. No, Jeffrey was just of the light, and he was just misguided. Let's love him. Now, there's a challenge with that too, because part of the spiritual path is to allow people their paths, right? And to see them as a soul having a journey. And I do believe that we can compassionately see the fact that someone is a soul having a human experience. And that doesn't mean that they're going to have a good one and they're going to do good things. I can hold that knowingness of you're a soul with a human, and you have every opportunity to come to know that for yourself. And the acts that you do and the way you live your life is the pathway to that. So, okay, yes. But does that mean that I just go, oh, okay, yeah, no, don't worry about it? Which is what he's asking us to do, which then is the don't speak, don't say anything, do not become an advocate for those kinds of atrocities. It's just let's let his soul rest and leave it at that, right? Like, that is some of we're going to talk about this soon too, is like the point, right? Like we get to this sort of arc of like the inversion comes in, we try to make it acceptable and pop out the other end where you're too ashamed to speak out against it, right? He's suggesting that you just look at yourself for all that projection that the poor Jeffrey suffered from us, and all that clicking of the newspapers just wanted to sell papers, and let him rest in peace and like leave it at that. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, just leave it be. I also think, you know, as you said, like the demonization, and also where he does talk about just the clicking. He has referenced that himself about himself, and all of the smear campaigns that have been brought against him is that he's been demonized, and his hate for the internet, how it causes just this, it's all about clicks and people making videos like ours right now. It's all about the clicks for us, and then the demonization of him. And this is a repeated theme for him. And so for him to also then say this is the same for Jeffrey, you know, again, it's like relational, you know, I get his energy, his Sabbatean energy, and so leave us alone.
Right. I don't want that turned on me.
No, like us bad guys are actually all light inside, and like, okay, yes, again, spiritual truth. We are light beings inside, but it's that distortion of that, once again, like speaking spiritual beliefs and truths, or, you know, understandings, but then like giving it the little jig like he does with his hands.
Yeah. And it's like, let's talk about language. And my friend Jeffrey, like, there are lines as far as like who I would be friends with. Right? Like, if we're living in integrity, we have discernment, and we're not going to just call, I don't know, a pedophile, a friend. Right? Which that kind of goes into something else that we're going to discuss in terms of how it all is. The bigger picture of this situation is beyond Gaffney, and it's this energy and how it tries to interject these transgressions that are not a part of society for a reason, but they try to, you know, let's accept the pedophile as we are one and the same. If we look at it, yes, they have maybe at the core, a pedophile is a soul, a being of light, but they have succumbed to the darkness much more than those who do not allow themselves to transgress in such ways. I think what Sheptai's work and actions was that is permissible. Those things are permissible. Transgression against a child, like, we have to have boundaries. We have to have discernment. If these ideas tells us that we're allowed to do that if that's our desire, because that's basically what he's saying. Like, okay, so you're saying that we follow our desire, we follow our eros, we follow it. But yeah, for some, that's going to be violating children.
Yeah.
And so, like, how do you say, like, oh, there's a boundary. That if you have that desire, that one's not okay. Right. And so he is advocating for taking your desire to where it wants to take you. And for those with unexamined dark energy, right? Where does this dark energy come from? Like, we received it through our traumas, we received it through our lineages, right? It's not ours, it's not us, but we hold those dark energies within them. And if we have those dark energies within us, our desires are going to be to do things that harm other people. And is he looking at that? Because I don't think so, because he has not fully acknowledged publicly, at least to my knowledge, the error of his journey, of his following his eros and his lust and his desires. And what did that result? Like, has he made amends for the, you know, where his eros led him? And are we advocating for, like, it's kind of like, what's the saying? It's like something, ask permission later. What is that saying?
Oh, yes. Yeah. Like do it anyway, but ask for forgiveness anyway. Don't ask for permission, ask for forgiveness afterwards, or something like that.
Exactly. It's the idea of like, oh, I'm just following my eros, and the consequences be damned. Like, I don't hear that this, and maybe that I'm only getting a superficial understanding of his teachings, but if we're boundaryless, then how do we know when we've gone too far, when and it feels like he doesn't even know that. And so, yeah, and in theory, what he's saying sounds good, but how does it play out in the real world?
Yeah. And something that in those other videos that we clipped from, he did mention, and I heard him say a couple of times, was that it's this eros when it's clarified. He clarifies that. And it was when it's clarified, right? And what does that mean? And so, okay, yes, he says that. But then let's come back to that. He is the reincarnation of Sabbatean. He's here to finish his work. And part of the Sabbatean Francis pattern is around sexual inversion, reframing taboo acts as redemptive, something that, it's these are the transgressions. They had that was a big part of what they did, and a big part of who they were, and a big part of how that was enacted. So is he fully living the path to complete that work? Because if he is, everything you just said there, that seems to be within the allowance of the following of the eros, the following of the desire, right? Okay, he mentions to clarify it, but in the mind where the trauma is the leading force, like, you could clarify that within your own mind and decide that this is right, this is what my desire is, this is how I want to fully express myself. And something else that, one of those videos he talked about, if I can't trust that, I can't trust that desire within me, I can't trust myself, that's a blurry line. That's permissive too, as you say, to the choices people make to sleep with a minor, or to, for in Aubrey's case, into polyamory. And like, if that's your desire, you have a right to it. I'm sure I wrote that down as something I heard him say in something there, like, you have a right to that divine desire within you to have it fully expressed. Clarify it. That just means get it straight in your head. Does that mean align it to moral codes, God, your divinity, the respect of somebody else? Maybe not.
Well, how does one know that, right?
Yeah.
If there's no boundaries, if you should trust your desire, what you feel internally, then like if you were physically abused and you learned to sexually abuse another person, right? And you have that desire, should you trust that? Like, is it like you need to heal those wounds first? I'm interested, has anyone followed his teachings and have you, like, how, like, I'd be interested to hear, like, is there a realistic, tangible way to follow this? Or is this like just theoretical rationalization for the path that he has chosen to take through his journey? And
and is it just a permission slip?
Exactly. And if we have a world, like, maybe we can go into this part of the conversation. I'm an Aquarian, sun, moon, rising, Mercury, right? I should be innovative, thinking outside the box, a rebel, like boundary breaking. And at the same time, you can only do so much of that. You need to have a container. You need to have, like, I struggle if I'm just out in the ether and the air, in the ideas, right? I need to have a container. But then part of also my gene keys is it's all about preservation, like what's worth being kept. And that's like conservatism in a way. What this, part of where this exploration led was this concept of liberalism and conservatism. And in many societies, right, these two ends of the spectrum are pitted against each other. You need to be liberal or you need to be conservative, not realizing that we need both. We need to feel what's inside us, but at the same time, we also need to have boundaries as well with what we are experiencing. And so liberation without liberalism, or liberation without any sort of value of the past or connection to what's worthy of being kept, creates imbalance, right? And so where this exploration led us to was looking at, where is this else in society is this playing out? And in terms of blurring the lines, creating confusion, having permissiveness and liberalism be seen as the moral way, and conservatism being shunned and labeled as something negative, right?
So yeah, well then let's start to talk about this. There's this playbook of infiltration. Like, how did these ideas of liberation, and I really believe this like pendulum swinging a little too far out to the edges, how does it get to that place where it's actually destructive rather than serving us for true liberation? That sort of flip for it's a hijack of liberation, really. There's a playbook to that. And first, we have the first step is anchoring in with authentic suffering. In that case, it could be women who are oppressed, or we're not equal to men. There's the feminist movement, or other demographics within society who are discriminated or under a sense of oppression. Then we want to step 2 for the Playbook of Infiltration is build a movement framed around compassion and liberation. So acceptance, equality, inclusivity for that group who are suffering. Step 3, begin to expand the definition and blurring the boundaries. So we take the heart of what was good and we have this movement that's begun. People are on board, but now is where we start to do the twist and we start to really push the edges of what might be acceptable. Step 4 then is a gaslighting of dissenters. As we're pushing these boundaries, as we're trying to start to bring into the conversation these expanded definitions or inverted concepts, we are then getting this gaslighting for anyone questioning the expansion of the container, and they're labeled as hateful, ignorant, oppressive, all of those labels. And then step 5, because you've been shamed, we're going to slip in the next taboo. So once the crowd is conditioned to not question, not say anything about it, the door opens for darker agendas to be smuggled in under the same umbrella. And this is precisely how boundary dissolution works. Little by little by little, how that pendulum of liberation, where we see a problem we want to solve, or an area of life where we see it's contracted, restricted, held back, we swing into this very aligned, heartfelt, compassionate, true, honest desire to seek liberation. But then this is where the Sabbatean energy starts to come in as we push that out further and further under the guise of liberation. So do you want to give us an example, Amanda, of how that would play out in society, or how we see that play out in society?
Yeah. So, just probably me speaking about this is going to maybe trigger some, because this playbook has been used around this topic. And so if we look about the LGBTQ plus movement, we'll see that there is truly a group of people that fit under a different category, right? First, the group that was most present was the lesbians and gays. So anchoring into that group, and then they built a movement around it, and it was viewed as framed around compassion and liberation. And so, really encouraging people to accept and be more inclusive and promote equality. And then move from just, marriage for lesbians and gays to now we're questioning sexual identity, gender, inserting it into schooling. And then for people who have an issue with some of these aspects of it, you're either all in, or you're going to be gaslit and you're going to be labeled as hateful, ignorant, oppressive, right? And then the final step is slipping in taboo. So people are concerned about children and them being taught certain things in school. And also this phenomenon of maps, and that's something that you just learned about, but minor attracted persons, right? That is being slipped into this movement of being accepted, being inclusive of those that have different sexual preferences, right? And so rather than those that are pedophiles, like that want to do things to children, being pushed out of society, we want to, the movement's trying to, not necessarily the people within the LGBTQ community, but those that are encouraging this movement are wanting to jump in and insert this in. So, we need to have compassion for these people that are attracted to children, and they reuse different language. Obviously, pedophilia has strong energy behind it, and so something like MAPS or a minor person is like, that's rebranding of basically people that want to do sexual acts on children. And so I don't even know how many of these words I'm allowed to say on YouTube, because I wonder if this video is going to be flagged, but we'll have to do some bleeping. But that is one way that we're seeing this Sabbatean energy play out. And so it's like you're either the political energy is created where it's like you're either for the whole spectrum of, and we went down this like slippery slope, you're for it all, you're in for like children receiving all of this, you're for all of it, or you're a hateful person. And so it creates this energy of people not questioning. And then something that's done is that compassion is weaponized, right? So if you're a compassionate person, which most people want to be, you are not going to question this. You're not going to go against this. And so those that maybe aren't looking deeper as to these underlying agendas, right? Like they might not even be aware of MAPS, but they want to be seen as good. So our goodness is our desire to be good is used to further this Sabbatean agenda, the Sabbatean energy.
Yeah, I just want to say that, first and foremost, it was shocking as hell for me to even hear that there is a term called MAPS. When I read that, when you sent me some notes, I literally sat here for ages in shock. I was literally in shock. And that's...
Sorry.
No, but that the thing is, right, like, that's the feeling we have. That's the physical feeling of distortion that we have, right? Like what the actual, I think I might have even said it out loud to myself in my office, like what the actual, because this is where, it's just it just really made me see just from that alone, how many things we see in society where there was a good intention. And I feel like, not that I've seen a lot of news in Australia, but every time I go back, I feel like I see it there all the time. These movements that had good roots, that had positive outcomes for people or situations, go too far, or it gets inverted, it gets twisted, it gets taken beyond the actual liberation. So that probably that point, that swing in the pendulum of where liberation is actually providing liberation and making a difference to, well, let's just keep going, where it's then like compromising. It comes out to a compromising position. And it actually, in effect, from what I see in Australia, it starts to break down the fabric of society, and society can't cope beyond that one point where, if it was a good balance of conservatism and it had a container of saying, okay, this, not to say this is enough liberation, that's not what I'm trying to say, but the healthy boundaries or the healthy range of liberation and conservatism, and like how to hold it as an energy, that's when it works. That's when it thrives. That's when society stays as a whole. And what I've seen is it's swung out beyond that. And then it is chaos. Chaos is the word. There's no control, because you're not allowed to do this anymore. You're not allowed to say that. You're not allowed to do this. And it's unfortunate, I think, in Australia is the police have literally no power anymore. And so kids are running completely riot in certain parts of Australia. And like the police retreat to their cars while they're being like attacked by people on the street, children. So we've gone too far. We've gone too far because there was no container for the liberation or whatever the I don't know what the actual pathway was to there, but it went too far. It was taking away the powers because they were too controlling. So, it was too much conservatism. So we wanted to, take away some of the power that they had to control, so that there was more freedom, but that freedom went too far. It's the effects of this are everywhere, and it's this the hardest part is the gaslighting and the shutting down of your voice because you're shamed. And this is, again, the larger picture of what we're going through the awakening is this dark force and the competition with the light. Like, it's trying to rip apart everything that makes us feel whole, stable, grounded, connected. And it is. It's just like this pushing of all the boundaries. I saw something else the other day, which was, some of this craziness that we're seeing in the world. And what I saw the other day is all of this chaos, all of this dark energy, let's say all of this Sabbatean energy that's inserting itself into so much of society and so many of the things that help us feel like we function. It's really starting to push us to see that the governments can't control it, and that there's speculation that this is then part of that agenda is that, AI is going to be a better way to govern, right? So again, it's energy, how it distorts for its own agenda. That there's a darker aspect to, how it can then control an entity, which also has its power for good. If we don't wake up, if we don't use our voices, if we don't start to look at the dark, see for what it is, and reclaim our power, bring that back in to have the containment for the liberation and really ask, am I really free? Is this serving us? Is it helping? Because that's where we have the control to bring that power, to take that power, that darker energy's power away. We have to wake up to that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that, this is all about control and liberation, right? Like at the core. And if we think about what came to mind is that the structure that Epstein, the model that was operating within, is that through these dark acts, he takes people's power away. Obviously, both the girls that are doing the acts, but the people that are being blackmailed, right? Like through doing those, following your desire, your eros, you are basically being controlled. When you just blindly follow your eros and your desires, you do acts that are, maybe the Sabbateans want them to be acceptable through things like maps, but they are not going to be acceptable. Like, I don't think humanity is going to allow for those things to be acceptable. And so if you do those acts, you are going to be controlled, right? You are going to have, be under the control of those forces that encourage you to follow that path. And so in a way, it's like he's being used by the man behind the curtain that won't say publicly that they are connected to further this idea that we just need to follow our desires and break boundaries. What boundary is too far? I don't know if we already went there, but like, if that's your desire, is that a boundary that's too far? And so to me, all of this is a permission slip to further the agenda of the controlling forces.
Yeah. And I just keep thinking to myself, like, once you see it, you can't unsee it. You can't unsee it. And then you just keep seeing it and seeing it and seeing it. And while I say that, I used to shun looking at all of this because I didn't want it to be part of my reality. And I was scared. But now I'm going to say that now that I look at it, now that I see it and I can't unsee it, I actually feel empowered. It's the strangest paradox. It's really, I don't know why. I feel empowered in a strange way, that by being able to see all of this and hold all of this and be aware of it and continue to expand my awareness around it. Like, there's something has happened from that. So for anyone listening that's like, fuck, this stuff is too heavy, I don't want to listen to this. Is this real? I encourage you to take your time to just look at bits and pieces and expand your understanding that the world, unfortunately, isn't, just this beautiful place to live. We want it to be, and it can be, but we have to look at what's not working and what's going on so that we can have a sense of power, because we don't have power when we deny it. We're living in a bubble that's not real, and we have no power to affect any positive change. We have to be able to see that and hold that, and then feel like this shift within us to be able to be empowered to use your voice, to share this information, to speak to what you see, to help other people become aware of it, because when we can see it, we're not in denial of it. We are more aware of it, and en masse, as part of the awakening, we can stand up to it. That's how far down the track that is, I don't know, because I just think, there's the seed of hope in all of us that through the course of time, the truth will be revealed. But there's so many powers at play that are going to be trying so hard to hide the seed of truth that is inside that darkness, that I don't know if we'll ever see it, but we have to trust that what we see and what we're sensing and what we're experiencing and what we're unraveling here is real. But then in that, there is a power that we have to face it and to not deny it and not shun it nor hide it. And then that's where we reclaim our light as well. And we can be a light looking at the dark, and you staring at face in the face, like my fear of it allows it to shroud me and keep me small.
Yeah. And the looking at it, by all of us looking at it, calling it out, it no longer can, there's eyeballs on what's happening, right? When we're willing to look at it and we're willing to speak about it. And the more that we look at it, the less fringe that it feels, right? The more we talk to more people about it, we see that we're not alone in seeing this craziness. Something that I mentioned, I think yesterday with you, was that when there's no explanation for the chaos that's happening in the world, it just feels random. That's what it feels like. It feels chaotic. It feels there's no explanation. There's no structure as to why the darkness exists and is happening. But when we understand there's a history to it, there's a lineage to it, there's this like underground, like I see this as like the underground tentacles that are coming up into society, and it's not all, doesn't appear like a monster like we'd see in a movie, right? It's coming out in the things that exist in our lives, and it's up to us to be discerning and recognize that there's something off there. And that's what I found. I think we both found this episode to be so powerful because it was like this exposure moment that so many people saw and so many people spoke about. And, Gaffney can say it was all for clicks, right? And
our projection.
Our projection, all for clicks. It's subtle, right? It's not overt.
Yeah.
And the more that we hone our ability to see it, like it loses its power, right? And so, yes, there's overt darkness, and that there are those that are blatantly calling it out and blatantly exposing it. And there are these subtle, more, I'd say even more dangerous ways that it's coming in through our world, through the structures and the mechanisms that we interact with on a daily basis. And if we just, I think it was Aaron Abke that said something recently. It's like indifference or, and I don't know if he said ignorance, but it's like indifference. And I would say ignorance if he didn't say that. It's like, that's what allows, that's like the devil is, that's what it wants, right? For us not to take a stand, for us not to like reject the energies that are trying to deceive us and distort us. And that's something that Gaffney said in his non-response video to us. It was like non-rejection is like the principle of Tantra. It's like you don't reject, and it's like, well, you're rejecting what's being said about you, but right, like you can't reject anything within Tantra. But in a way, that is playing in that devil energy of like, let's accept all and not take a stand against those that are trying to, through deceptive and devious ways, to take us into the darkness, dim our lights, but it's all being done very deceptively. And it can happen all through with us staying ignorant and in the dark of what's happening.
Yeah. I just see, as you said, like it's these tentacles like coming out from the ground, like it's inside the structures of society, it's inside religions, it's inside governments, it's inside systems, right? So we're things that we trust things that we've always been part of our lives. And so that's why it's so shocking and so hard sometimes to accept that that's actually what's happening. But that is exactly the time that we're going through, is seeing some of the energy that's inside there, what we want to take from that as they crumble and we see it. How do we want to make things anew? Because that is the choice point that we're really at this time through the awakening, is where are we going? What do we want for the future? And we have to see the dark to be able to turn to some new idea of what's possible.
Yeah, I feel like we kind of hit all the points that we wanted to hit on this topic, and I'm interested to hear from people. What is their experience or knowledge around this topic? And were you familiar with Sabbatean energy or Shabtai Tzvi? And or did you, does this all make sense, right? Like, and then where else in society and in life do you see these energies playing out? We'd love to hear your thoughts and see where this conversation wants to continue. And, you know, maybe we'll do some more follow-up episodes if, you know, there are some good questions that we want to explore even further. Anything else that you want to add, Kate, before we sign off here?
No, I think we've covered a lot. And I just think, you know, again, as everything, it's an opportunity to reflect, look within for ourselves, learn something new, potentially, you know, as I said, even through my experience, be willing to look a little more, because as scary as it is, and I think I often thought it would be consumed by the fear, there is a level of inner work that we need to do to be able to hold that and not get caught up under fear. But maybe that's the work. But moving into that place of being able to look, eyes open, heart stay open, just openness, there is a sense of empowerment that comes from it, which I think we really, really need right now, which is the antidote to the fear. And it's the fear of looking at it, like, you know, so you don't want to do it. Because we fear what we're going to see. And so the fear keeps us stuck. But if you do it, you don't feel fear, or at least you can move from or through fear to a place of empowerment. And I really want to encourage that for anyone listening that might find it challenging. So yeah, well, thank you. We'll leave it there. Thank you, Amanda, for a great conversation.
Thank you.
And thank you, everyone, for listening. We'll join you in the next episode.